If you're planting a native forest, either in your backyard or for a larger restoration project, then this video is for you. Now, if you're already on this path, then you've likely already selected a large list of potential plant species for your project. This is usually selected based on the species that are already locally occurring in the wider landscape around your project, typically in the same region. Now, one thing that you really need to keep in mind though for any restoration project is what your final goal actually is. Usually this is to return biodiversity to your project site, and what that typically means is, of course, the plant species, but also attracting back the wildlife. Now, the key to attracting back wildlife to your project is restoring their key habitat. That can be places for them to live and also the food that they need to survive. Specifically today, I'm going to be covering the fruit-eating species, and in New Zealand that is typically just the birds. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. But keep in mind that this is going to be essential for other aspects as well, so species that feed on nectar from flowers and so forth. But today, focusing on the fruits. More specifically, you need to be providing fruit throughout the broadest range throughout the year as possible. So if you have species that only fruit during the autumn season, that's not going to be much help to fruit-eating species in winter or spring or summer, is it? So we need to really keep that in mind. And another thing that is really important is the time horizon that you have for when you want these species to come back, because some species will start to fruit within a few years after planting, whereas others can take decades before they actually start to produce fruit. So I'm here in a natural forest here in the Northland region of New Zealand, and I'm going to do a bit of a walk around and point out the fruiting species, and we're going to see if this naturally occurring habitat here is actually suitable for supporting a population of fruit-eating bird species all year round. So without further ado, let's take a look at what fruit species we actually have in this forest, and we'll see if we cover that full calendar year, or as close to it as we possibly can. Okay, so to start with, we've got here is a dwarf cabbage tree. And this is something you may not have realized, is that we actually have different cabbage tree species in New Zealand, and this is going to be one of the main themes of this video for reaching a broad range of times where we have active fruiting occurring in your project, is focusing on alternative species that are closely related. So this dwarf cabbage tree, it does co-occur in this forest with regular cabbage trees, and because they're closely related, they have the potential to hybridize with each other, which isn't ideal for the species. So because they're co-occurring, they need to work out some kind of adaptation to avoid hybridization. And typically what that can look like is flowering at slightly different times, because if you flower at different times, that drastically lowers the chance of cross-pollination from one species to the other. And you can probably imagine that flowering at a different time also means that they're probably going to fruit at a different time as well. So that's going to be perfect here if we added dwarf cabbage tree and regular cabbage tree to our project. You may increase the time frame of cabbage tree fruit that are available for your fruit-eating species. Another example of this is right here. We do have a Coprosma rhamnoides, twiggy Coprosma, and right beside it this is a Coprosma spathulata. Different species, they're typically going to fruit at slightly different times. Sometimes they do fruit at the same times as well. I mean, I've got a fruit right here, just a couple on the spathulata, and I have seen some fruiting twiggy Coprosma, but the key with this is that there will be a slightly different range. There will be some overlap, but that overlap will be not super substantial. So hopefully that covers a broader time horizon to hopefully give your fruit-eating species a longer eating window, which is what we're after. All right, let's see what else we've got. We do have here another Coprosma, I think. Yes, so this one here is Coprosma arborea, the tree coprosma. Now this one does apparently sporadically flower or fruit throughout the entire year, but it's not kind of super prolific. I've not really come across many tree coprosmas in fruit in my time adventuring the forests, so I wouldn't rely on the species alone to cover your frugivory needs, your fruit-eating bird species needs, because I mean they don't seem to produce a whole lot, but they do kind of cover that full year range, which is quite handy to keep in mind. Now, what I was talking about with the time horizon is species that typically don't flower until they are much bigger and more mature, like this rimu tree here. And this is the same for most podocarp species, our big fruiting coniferous species. Totara, rimu, kahikatea, mero and matai, they take a very long time before they start to fruit. So it is really good to be planting them in your project, but don't rely on them to attract back any fruit-eating bird species for quite some time. Alright, let's see what else we've got. We've got a kawakawa. The pepper tree is what it's referred to by its common English name. This one is a classic summer fruiting species, kind of these long orange berries that it produces. Produced in the summer, that's covering another season for us, which is perfect. We do have there a kohi tree that's growing. Again, this is one that's going to take a little bit longer to mature, but it does produce fruit, so we are going to add that to the list. You're just going to have to wait a little bit before it starts to attract any birds. We do have over there an Astalia, the widowmaker, up there attached to the side of the tree. Widowmaker because they eventually get too heavy and fall down, and if you're underneath a tree that a widowmaker falls out of, well, you'll figure out why it's called that pretty quickly. But we do have here some more Coprosma species. This is a really great one to keep in mind, is the Coprosma genus. We do have 50 to 60 species in New Zealand, and typically any one region of New Zealand will have quite a few species available for you to choose from. I would be very wary about bringing in species from other regions though. So if you're here in Northland, I wouldn't bring in species that are native to a South Island region, for example, because they may not have that adaptation to avoid hybridization, as I talked about with the cabbage tree over there. So try to only bring in species that are adapted to occur or co-occur naturally in the wild. So this here is Coprosma lucida. It naturally occurs with the other Coprosma species that we're seeing here, so it should naturally have adaptations to avoid hybridization. That's the key here. Species need to naturally co-occur, otherwise you may end up mixing genetic material, and in doing so you're actually losing biodiversity at the genetic level. Another one that we've got here is toropapa. In Northland we do have a few species of toropapa. We've got Alciosmia banksii, and over there I can see an Alciosmia quercifolia that's actually in flower currently. Same thing's going to be happening with that. Probably slightly different flowering times, meaning slightly different fruiting times, covering a broader range of fruit availability for frugivores. I don't know if I mentioned, frugivore is the term for a fruit-eating species. You probably figured that out by now. We've got more. The pigeonwood produces orange little berries there. Great for pigeons, as you may expect. The native kiriru that we've got here in New Zealand. We've got here a totara species, another one that's going to take a very long time to mature and start producing berries, unfortunately. Still a good one to include. And I did see another one here. I think this is, looks like a Dianella. They produce, sometimes referred to as a New Zealand blueberry. That's not actually a blueberry, but it produces these bright, vivid blue berries on these stems. We've got the tanikaha that also produces little white fruit-like berry things. Similar to our podocarps, it's going to take a little while before it starts to actually fruit. And beside it here, tall mingi mingi. This one here is actually in the blueberry family, believe it or not, and it does produce little, well, the berries are white, but they are kind of blueberry shaped. So white or pink actually. But yeah, blueberry family, produces fruit, perfect. We do have here actually a horoweka or lancewood This is in the Pseudopanax genus, and that's important to keep in mind. I'm going to be pointing something out later that is referring to this, but again, produces fruit, perfect for attracting some native birds. Another one here is Karaka. Produces big kind of orange oval shaped fruit. Something to keep in mind is the size of the fruit for the birds that you're attempting to attract, because Karaka is only really suitable for our kereru. Some of our smaller birds that like to eat fruit, they can't swallow a Karaka fruit. So keep that in mind. You may need to grab more than one species that overlaps the same time frame of the year to suit all of your bird species needs. We've got here is, this one's actually the large-leaved mahoe, I believe. Can't remember, it's Melicitus macrophylla, or macrophyllus, I think. We do have another one in this forest that I've seen as well, Melicitus ramiflorus, same genus. Again, there's likely going to be a slight difference in that flowering time, meaning a slight difference in the fruiting time. You're starting to see the pattern here. The more species diversity that we can get, the better off we're going to be. Here we go, here's the regular mahoe here compared to the large-leaved mahoe right there. The only reason these can co-occur is that they have some kind of adaptation to not hybridize, which is likely that they flower at different times. I can't guarantee that for sure though. Here's another one here, is the red matipo. This one here produces little black berries. Again, another one to add to our list to hopefully fill out that calendar of fruiting. Alright, and another species perfect for our native birds is the puriri tree. Produces kind of a reasonably large, round, pink berry, and again, slightly larger fruit. Might only be suitable for some of our species, but not all of them. Okay, we've got another species yet again, Coprosma macrocarpa, adding to that Coprosma list of co-occurring species. Okay, so I emphasized the lancewood or horoeka earlier, and that it was in the Pseudopanax genus. This here is another species in that same genus. This is the coastal five-finger or houpara, and an important thing here is that these species aren't actually typically co-occurring in nature. And what happens when they do co-occur, this here is a pretty natural looking houpara, but when they are closely co-occurring with the lancewood, which I pointed out earlier, you do start to get some hybridization issues going on. And this means that these species must flower at similar times of year. And this here is a hybrid, which kind of produces these strange looking leaves. Doesn't look quite like our coastal five-finger, doesn't look quite like lancewood. So hybridization is occurring here because these two species aren't really meant to co-occur in close proximity to one another. So that is something to keep in mind, and that is precisely why you need to only include species that naturally occur in your environment. Don't go looking further abroad and bringing in species from other regions just because they look cool. Okay, we've got a species here that you may be a little bit apprehensive to actually bring back to your project because it does have a bit of a infamy for being painful. This is the bush lawyer, which is in the blackberry genus, so it does have little thorns on it, so it can be a little bit nasty to run into, but it is a great fruiting species. Being in the blackberry genus, it produces little blackberries, which you can also eat yourself if you so wish. Well, there you go. That is but one of many aspects that you must keep in mind when restoring a native forest, either in your backyard or for a more comprehensive restoration project. We need to think about what food you are providing to the wildlife that you're attempting to attract back. We focused on fruit today, but again, you're going to have to repeat this process for the flowers to attract back the nectarivorous species in New Zealand. That could include our bellbird and tui, but also our many native bees, beetles, moths, that sort of thing. They're all really important, especially down the line a little bit further, attempting to attract the insectivores back to your forest as well. Anyways, I hope this has been helpful. If it has, please don't forget to drop a like and also subscribe if you want to see more of this content. And I have actually written up a little bit of a more comprehensive blog post. It's on my website, which will be down in the description, so have a read of that, and yeah, hope it helps.